doing well. Before we start reading, I want to go over those questions that I had asked. So let's look over them. And they should have been pretty simple questions. The first one was, who is Serafina? What do you know about her? Well, Serafina, I know, is going to be our main character in the story. She is a girl who is 12 years old. She has just earned a pretty cool title at her living space, which she lives in Biltmore in the boiler room with her paw. She likes to catch rats at night, and she likes to sleep in the day, and she likes to imagine what it would be like if she could talk to all the other people that were there. So that's a little bit what we know about Serafina so far. Why do you think Serafina and Pa live in the basement? What is her daily life like? Well, Serafina and her Pa live in the basement because it said somewhere in here that they had nowhere else to go, and so that's why they stayed there. And her Pa would tell her, don't let anyone know that we're here, probably because they're not supposed to be here if they're doing that without permission. In her daily life, I'm going to assume that just kind of like what it was telling us before, that she is hunting at night and sleeping in the day, and she's just getting over. She imagines things, what it would be like if maybe they didn't have to live a life of secrecy. And then our last question was, what is Serafina's job, and does she enjoy it? Her job, she earned the title of CRC, which is the Chief Rat Catcher. So I think that she enjoys it. I think that she likes to have that title. She kind of smiled when her dad gave that to her. So I think that she does like it, and I think that she appreciates her dad to try to make her feel special. So those were our questions. So now I'm going to go ahead and backtrack a little bit from where we left off and read two paragraphs from where we left off, just so we can revisit where we were. So he said, "You're the chief rat catcher," he said. However, the words were intended. They embezzled themselves in her mind. She remembered even now, 2 years later, how her little chest had swelled and how she had smiled with, sorry, there was a B and it was bothering me. It was making me nervous. But she had remembered even 2 years later how her little chest had swelled and how she had smiled with pride when he'd said those words, Chief Rat Catcher. She had liked the sound of that. Everyone knows that the rodents were a big problem in a place like Biltmore, with all of its sheds and shelves and barns and whatnots. And it was true that she had shown a natural-born talent for snatching the cunning, food-stealing, dropping-leaving, disease-infected, four-legged vermin that so indulged in the adult folk with their crude traps and poisons. Mice, which were timid and prone to panic-induced mistakes at the key moments, were no trouble for her to catch. It was the rats that gave her a scamper each night, and it was the rats that had honed her skills. She was 12 years old now, and that's who she was, Serafina, CRC. All right, now we're starting new, so let's pay attention. But as she watched the two rats run into the forest, a strange and powerful feeling took over her. She wanted them, and she wanted to see what they saw beneath the leaf and twig, to explore the rock and dells, the streams and wonders. But her Pa had forbidden her. Never go into the forest, he had told her many times. There are dark forces there that no one understands, things that ain't natural and can do you wicked harm. She stood at the edge of the forest and looked as far as she could see into the trees. For years she had heard stories of people who got lost in the forest and never returned. She wondered what dangers lurked there. Was it black magic? Demons? Some sort of horrendous beast? What was her Pa so afraid of? She might bandy back and forth with her Pa about all sorts of things, just for the jump of it, like refusing her grits, sleeping all day and hunting all night, and spying on the Vanderbilts and their guests. But she never argued about this. She knew, when he had said those words, that he was serious as her dead mama. For all the spiny talk and all the sneak about, sometimes you just stayed quiet and you did what you were told because you sensed it was a good way to keep breathing. Feeling strangely lonesome, she had turned away from the forest and gazed back into the estate. The moon rose above the steeply pitched slate roofs of the house and reflected in the panes of the glass that doomed in the winter garden. The stars sparkled above the manicured grounds, glowed in the midnight light. She could see every detail, every toad and snail, and all of the other creatures of the night. A lone mockingbird sang its evening song from a magnolia tree, and the baby hummingbirds, tucked into their tiny nests among the climbing wisteria, rustled in their sleep. It lifted her chin a bit to think that her pa had helped build all of this. He had been one of the hundreds of stonemasons, wood carvers, and other craftsmen who had come to Asheville from the surrounding mountains to construct Biltmore Estate years before. He had stayed on to maintain the machinery, but when all the other basement workers went home to their families each night, he and Serafina hid along the steam pipes and the material and the metal tools in the workshop like stowaways in the engine room of the great ship. The truth was they had no place else to go, no kin to go home to. Whenever she had asked about her mama, her father refused to talk about her, so there wasn't anyone else besides her and her pa. And they made the basement their home from as long as they could remember. How come we don't live in the servants' quarters in the town like the other workers, Pa? She had asked many times. You never mind about that, he would grumble in reply. Over the years, her pa had taught her how to read and write pretty well, and he told her plenty of stories about the world, but he never was too keen on talking about what she wanted to talk about, which was what was going on deep down in his heart, and what happened to her mama, and why didn't she have any brothers or sisters, and why she and her pa didn't have any friends who'd come around to talk. Sometimes she wanted to reach down inside him and shake him up to see what would happen. But most of the time her pa just slept all night and worked all day, and cooked their dinner in the evening, and told her stories, and they had a pretty good life, the two of them. And she didn't shake him because she knew that he didn't want to be shook. So she just let him be. At night, when everyone else in the house went to sleep, she crept upstairs and snatched books to read in the moonlight. She'd overheard the butler boasting to a visiting writer that Mr. Vanderbilt had collected 22,000 books, only half of which fit in the library room. The others were stored on tables and shelves throughout the house, and to Serafina, these were like June berries ripe for the picking. Too tempting to resist. No one seemed to notice when a book went missing and was back in its place a few days later. She had read about the great battles between the states with tattered flags flying, and she had read about the steaming iron beast that hurled people hither and yon. She wanted to sneak into their graveyards at night with Tom and Huck, and be shipwrecked with the Swiss Family Robinson. Some nights she longed to be one of the four sisters with their loving mother in Little Women. Other nights she had imagined meeting the ghost of Sleepy Hollow, or tapping, tapping, tapping with Poe's Black Raven. She liked to tell her pa about the books she read, and she often made up stories on her own, filled with imaginary friends and strange families and ghosts in the night. But he had never interested, but he was never interested in her tales of fancy and fright. He was far too of a sensible man for all of that, and he didn't like to believe in anything but bricks and bolts and solid things. More and more she wondered what would it be like to have some sort of secret friend who her pa didn't know about, someone that she could talk to about things. But she didn't tend to meet too many children her age sulking through the basement in the dead of night. A few of the low-level kitchen scullions and boiler tenders who worked in the basement and went home each night had seen her daunting here or there, and knew vaguely who she was. But the maids and the manservants who worked on the main floors did not. And certainly the master and mistress of the house didn't know she existed. The Vanderbilts are a good kind of folk, Sarah, her pa had told her, but they ain't our kind of folk. You keep to yourself scarce when they come about. Don't let anyone get a good look at you. And whatever you do, don't tell anyone your name or who you are, you hear?" Serafina did hear. She heard very well. She could hear a mouse change his mind. Yet, she didn't even know exactly why she and her pa lived the way they did. She didn't know why her father hid her away from the world. Why was he ashamed of her? But she did know one thing for sure, that she loved him with all her heart. And the last thing she ever wanted to do was cause him trouble. So she became an expert at moving undetected, not just to chase the rat or to catch the rats, but to avoid the people too. When she was feeling particularly brave or lonely, she darted upstairs into the comings and goings of the sparkling folk. She snuck and crept and hid. She was small for her age and light of foot. The shadows were her friends. She spied on the fancy-dressed guests as they arrived in their splendid horse-drawn carriages. No one upstairs ever saw her hiding beneath the bed or behind the door. No one noticed her in the back of the closet when they would put their coats inside. When the ladies and gentlemen went on their walks on the grounds, she slinked up right next to them without them knowing and listened to everything they were saying. She loved seeing the young girls in their blue and yellow dresses with ribbons fluttering in their hair, and she ran along with them when they frolicked through the garden. When the children played hide and seek, they never realized there was another player. Sometimes she'd even see Mr. and Mrs. Vanderbilt walking arm in arm, or she'd see their 12-year-old nephew riding his horse across the grounds, with his sleek black dog running alongside. She had watched them all, but none of them ever saw her, not even the dog. Lately, she had been wondering just what would happen if they did. What if the boy glimpsed her? What would she do? What if his dog chased her? Could she get up a tree in time? Sometimes she liked to imagine what she would say if she met Mrs. Vanderbilt face to face. Hello, Miss V. I catch your rats for you. Would you like them killed or just chucked out? Sometimes she dreamed of wearing fancy dresses and ribbons in her hair and shiny shoes on her feet. And sometimes, just sometimes, she longed not just to listen secretly to the people around her, but to talk to them. Not just to see them, but to be seen. She walked through the moonlight across the open grass and back to the main house. She wondered what would happen if one of the guests, or perhaps the young master in his bedroom on the second floor, happened to wake and look out his window and see a mysterious girl walking alone in the night. Her pa never spoke of it, but she knew that she wasn't exactly normal looking. She had a skinny little body, nothing but muscle and bone, and she didn't own a dress. She wore one of her pa's old work shirts, which she cinched around the narrow waist with the length of a fibrous twine that she scavenged from the workshop. He didn't buy her any clothes because he didn't want people in town to ask questions or start meddling. Meddling was something he could never brook. Her hair wasn't a single color like normal people had, but a varying shades of gold and light brown. Her face had a particular angularity in the cheeks, and she had large, steady amber eyes. She could see at night, as well as she could during the day. Even her soundless hunting skills weren't exactly normal. Every person she had ever encountered, especially her pa, made so much noise when they walked, it was like they were one of the big Delagan draft horses that pulled the farm equipment in Mr. Vanderbilt's fields. And it made her wonder, looking up at the windows of the great house. What did the people sleeping in those rooms dream of? Was their one-colored hair and their long, pointy noses and their big bodies lying in their soft beds all through the glorious darkness of night? What did they long for? What made them laugh or jump? What did they feel inside? When they had dinner at night, did the children eat the grits or just the chicken? As she glided down the stairs and back into the basement, she heard something in the distant corridor. She stopped and listened, but she couldn't quite make it out. It wasn't a rat. That much was certain. Something much larger. But what was it? Curious, she moved towards the sound. She went past her pa's workshop, the kitchens, and the other rooms she knew well, and into the deeper areas where she hunted less often. She heard doors closing, and then the fall of footsteps and muffled noises. Her heart began to thump lightly in her chest. Someone was walking through the corridors of the basement. Her basement. She moved closer. It wasn't the servant who collected the garbage each night, or one of the footmen fetching a late-night snack for a guest. She knew the sounds of their footsteps well. Sometimes the butler's assistant, who was 11, would stop in the corridors and gobble down a few of the cookies from the silver tray that the butler had sent him to retrieve. She'd stand just around the corner from him and into the darkness and pretend that they were friends, just talking and enjoying each other's company for a while. Then the boy would wipe the powdered sugar off his lips, and he'd go hurrying up the stairs to catch on for the time that he had lost. But this wasn't him. Whoever it was, he wore what sounded like a hard-soled shoe. Expensive shoes. But the gentleman proper had no business coming down into this area of the house. Why was he wandering through the dark passages in the middle of the night? Increasingly curious, she followed the stranger, careful to avoid being seen. Whenever she snuck up close enough to almost see him, all she could make out was the shadow of a tall, black shape carrying a dimly lit lantern. And there was another shadow there, too. Someone or something with him. But she didn't dare creep close enough to see who or what it was. It was a vast basement with many different rooms, corridors, and levels, which had been built into the slope of the earth beneath the house. Some areas, like the kitchen and the laundry, had smooth plastered walls and windows. The rooms there were plainly finished, but clean and dry, and well suited for the daily work of the servants. The more distant reaches of the understructure developed deep into the damp and earthen burrows of the house's massive foundation. Here, the dark, hardened mortar oozed out from between the roughly hewn stone blades that formed the wall and the ceiling. And she seldom went there because it was cold, dirty, and dank. Suddenly, the footsteps changed direction. They came towards her. 5 screeching rats came running down the corridor ahead of the foot hall, more terrified than any rodent she had ever seen. Spiders crawled out of the cracks in the walls. Cockroaches and centipedes erupted from the earthen floor. Astounded by what she was seeing, she caught her breath and pressed herself to the wall, frozen in fear, like a little rabbit kicked trembling beneath the shadow of a passing hawk. As the man walked towards her, and she heard another sound too. It was shuffling irrigation, like a small person. Slippered feet? Perhaps a child? But there was something wrong. The child's feet were scraping the stone, sometimes sliding. The child was crippled? No. The child was being dragged. "No, sir. Please, no," the girl whimpered, in her voice trembling with despair. "We're not supposed to be down here." The girl spoke like someone who had been raised in a well-heeled family and attended a fancy school. Don't worry, we're going right here, the man said, stopping the door just around the corner from Serafina. Now she could hear his breathing and movement of his hands and the rustle of his clothing. Flashes of heat scorched through her. She wanted to run, to flee, but she couldn't get her legs to move. There's nothing to be frightened of, child, he said to the girl. I'm not going to hurt you. The way that he said these words caused the hairs on the back of Serafina's neck to rise. Don't go with him. Don't go with him, she thought. Don't go. The girl sounded like that she was a little younger than her, and Serafina wanted to help her, but she couldn't find the courage. She pressed herself against the wall, certain that she would be heard or seen. Her legs trembled, feeling as if they could crumble beneath her. She couldn't see what happened next, but suddenly the girl let out a blood-curdling scream. The piercing sound caused Serafina to jump, and she had stifled her own scream. Then they heard the struggle as the girl tore away from the man and fled down the corridor. Run, girl, run, Serafina thought. The man's steps faded into the distance as he went after her. Serafina could tell that he wasn't running full out, but moving steadily, relentlessly, like he knew the girl couldn't escape him. Serafina's pa had told her that's how the red wolves chase down and kill deer in the mountains, with dogged stamina rather than bursts of speed. Serafina didn't know what to do. Should she hide in the dark corner and hope that he didn't find her? Should he flee with the terror-stricken rats and spiders if she had the chance? She wanted to run back to her father, but what about the child? The girl was so helpless, so slow and weak and frightened, and more than anything, she needed a friend to help her fight. Serafina wanted to be that friend. She wanted to help her, but she couldn't bring herself to move in that direction. So we are going to stop right there. We only have a couple more pages, but we will save that for another day. So thank you all for listening.